see everybody in this foggy morning, but at least the rain let up for a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Well, I hadn't had enough yet. We don't have 4 more days coming. Get to your feet. As always, before we get started on our lesson today, does anyone have any updates or additions that James would need to put on the list? Or if you would, we'll start off with a prayer. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to come together today and worship you. Lord, please you be with those that are unable to be here today. Lord, may they be fully recovered in their health and able to rejoin us in worship in the future. Lord, there's many on our prayer list. Lord, those that have lost loved ones, comfort them as only you can. Those that are undergoing tests or enduring sickness, be with them. Comfort them and pray that they should be restored to their full health. Lord, please be with everyone that's serving in any capacity today. Lord, bless them in their abilities. May the worship we do today be pleasing to you, as in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So, we've been studying on Lesson 10, Renewing Our Passion for God. And it's the currency of Christian passion, which is money. And we got started on this last week. We started with the reminder that money's not the root of all evil. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil and the danger with money. We went through number 1. It says, we're talking about bewaring the desire to be rich. And we got down to number 5 on the 3rd page there. We went here last week. So we're going to start off today with loving money always has devastating effects. So that starts with 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 9 through 10. So it's 1 Timothy 6, verses 9 through 10. And we're having a lot of verses in 1 Timothy both last week and this week. So I'll read that for you. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. So loving money always has devastating effects because, 1, it causes people to fall into temptations and snares. It causes people to get into foolish and harmful lusts. It causes people to plunge into ruin and destruction. And it causes people to stray from the faith. And it causes people to inflict great sorrow upon themselves. Number 6 ends it with loving money. Loving money simply isn't worth it. Is it? And it says, then why do so many of us buy into it? So any thoughts on the devastating effects of the love of money before we move on? All right. I think that's true, or I think you can look too, like you can use the sports world as an example. Those that achieve a higher status than others, it's normally because it is the number one priority in their life, and all of their time and attention is focused on that, and everything else suffers. So I think the same can be said of money. If it's the most important thing, and all of our attention and desire is built on the accumulation of money, and that's a serious thing. I mean, having enough money to sustain yourself is very important. But some people fall in love just with the accumulation. How much can I build it to? They don't even enjoy it and spend it. You know, it's just the building of that. How much can I have? And also money brings with it power, right? And power brings itself new temptations into us.
Sometimes it's like other things in our life. It happens so slowly that we don't see the danger of it.
Right.
You know, if it happens real quick, you're like, man, there's a possibility to go, oh, I got to back up.
Right.
But when it happens slow, it's like it creeps in.
Kind of like that frog in the water, right? He started off warm and heated up, don't get out.
And all of a sudden you look up and, oh, God, he's 5
stuff. Anything else?
Dan brings up a good point, that in verse 9, he uses the word desire, uses snare in the same sentence. So that desire is a snare. Well, what is a snare? It's a trap, and a lot of times when you set a snare, you cover it up where it can't be seen. So Dan brings up a good point. It might slip up on you before you even realize it.
Right? And there's usually bait in that snare, right? But baiting us in there. Good stuff. Anything else?
There are people who would spend their last penny trying to get more money. Go to those casinos and stuff and can't make themselves stop,
Right?
hoping that they'll hit it big. They even got it now where you can get online and gamble.
Yeah. They make it easy for you to give them their money. Right?
Give your last penny, but
Uh-huh.
you can get online and do it.
Right?
A lot of people praise people with money. They get praises for it. It's already.
Just like there's celebrity worship, right? You know, we worship people for that they've achieved, and
You can be a bad person and still be praised because they got money.
right? I don't know personally, but I've heard rumor that the richer you get, the better looking you get too. So I guess that could bring other problems with it as well. Right? Brings me, not really friends, but yeah.
With Tom saying that, look what happened to the prodigal son's friends when he ran.
Right. Yeah.
They were gone.
That's right. You know, people that are really wealthy, it'd be hard to trust why people were wanting to be in a relationship with you or friends with you. I think it would bring a whole new set of problems there. Yeah.
Billy Sims had a lot of friends until he lost his money.
Right.
I played against him 3 times. Killed me every time.
And money solves some problems, but it brings its own set. I've heard many people say, well, I didn't have these problems when I didn't have money. You know, he had a different set of problems, I guess, but doesn't solve all your problems.
He brings up a very good point. The night he got that Lords of London contract, he was there for the homecoming dressed in white, and he had all his buddies there on the side. They were all there with him. And that was in 1986.
It was a snare to the rich young ruler. When you look at Abraham, he was blessed, and he used it for God's purpose.
Right. Huh? What about the man that asked Christ what he had to do to get into heaven? He said he's done all those things. He'd followed the commandments, and Christ said, go give away all you have and sell all you have and give it to the poor and follow me. And he walked away sad, right? He couldn't do that. And it wasn't that he couldn't follow him with money. It was the love of money. Christ knew he had that love of money. He knew he couldn't sacrifice that for him. And that's the amazing thing about Christ and God. They know our hearts. They know where our heart really is. Good stuff. All right, now it's going to get hard here. Number 2, be content with wartime necessities. It's kind of harsh, right? Wartime necessities. It says, really think about 1 Timothy 6, 7 through 8. Let's read that again. Verse 7, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. So food and clothing, those are our true necessities, right? So what does it say about the contentment with food, clothing, and shelter? It says the terminology of the passage includes covering in the sense of adequate clothing or a roof over our heads. So God tells us he'll provide what for us financially? Our needs, right? Yeah. I think it's easy to get confused what are needs and wants. You know, do we really need a new set of golf clubs or boat? You know, I don't think those fall into, I got some scowls on boat. I've felt the hurt on golf clubs. There's definitely a line, you know, the what we need, and having enough money for what you need is important, but for those other things, maybe not so much. 2 says, when we have God, and he is our reason for joy and passion, we don't need money and material abundance to give us a sense of peace and security. God is better than gold, Though much of the world disagrees, and many Christians struggle with the thought. Money can't fill that void that God has put within us to make us crave Him, right? It can't fill it. It can bring temporary happiness, but not that true happiness that God can bring to us. 3 says we can be content with simplicity because the deepest, most satisfying blessing God gives are the beauties of His creation and loving relationships with others. Fascination with money and material things tends to diminish our ability to appreciate these things rather than to enhance it. I think the word fascination there was an interesting word to use, the fascination with money. And let's go to Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 30. And let's read 7 through 9. There's 2 things I request of you. Deprive me not before I die. Remove falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. And flip back 2 chapters to chapter 28, and we'll read verse 20. A faithful man will abound with blessings, but he who hastens to be rich will not go unpunished. Hastens to be rich, what does that mean?
So let's think about hurry up, get there, no matter what it takes.
Yeah. So as James mentioned earlier, if you don't get rich quick, you're probably going to have to cut some corners, right? Probably going to do some things to get there more quickly. And what would cause you to do that would be greed. And if you sacrifice your morals, your ethics to cut those corners, most people that do crooked things, especially with money, don't normally just go from being good to there. It's that first step into the gray, then you go a little more into the gray, and then next thing you know, you're Bernie Madoff or somebody, and just really cross the line. That man was a true story of greed. I don't know if you've watched the documentary on him, but it's pretty interesting. Bernie Madoff, if you don't know, was the person that had a Ponzi scheme and embezzled a lot of people out of a lot of money, and it was all just pure greed. He lived a really good lifestyle off of those people that he burdened. But the end wasn't pretty. He went to prison, and while he was in prison, both of his sons passed, and then he passed in prison. And I can't imagine a much worse ending than that. But it wasn't worth it at the end.
Hey, Mel,
Yes, sir.
that passage you read in Proverbs 30,
Uh-huh.
I find it very interesting that Solomon said here, he doesn't want to be rich nor poor.
Mhm.
What he's telling us is being somewhere in the middle is a good spot. For
Yeah.
those of us who are middle class, it seems like we're in a good spot.
I agree with that. You have enough for your needs, right? But maybe not so much to cause all those temptations.
The Bible also teaches to work in such a way and put up some in case you run across somebody with a need.
Yeah, and we're going to touch on that. It's not wrong to have excess money put away to help others, right? It's nothing wrong with building those barns and putting that hay away. But if you do it for you and for all you and give yourself all the glory, that's when, Melissa, what did you say?
It's not wrong to have excess.
Right.
Just what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's how you use it, that's right.
right. I'm a planner, it's what I do. And it would go against everything I think of to not plan ahead and not prepare. But, there's the parable of the grasshopper and the ant. I can't remember if I mentioned this last week or not. I apologize if I did. But, the grasshopper labored every day. Well, he just played every day for today and then think about the future, and winter came and he had no food. The ant put away for the winter, and it had for the winter, but I think you need to be a combination of the two. Winter may not come. You may not be here for winter. live life today, but also prepare for the future. Because if it does come, you need to be prepared, right? But be ready to go anytime, I think, too. Anybody else before we move on? Got on a little tangent there, I'm sorry.
Came into this world without anything,
Yep.
and we leave.
We might read that verse before today's over if we get there, but you're right. We came into this world with nothing and we leave the same way.
I think we look at wrong, at Matthew 6:33, it was to realize that we don't, that the Lord will give us enough, but not necessarily too much. When it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you.
Yeah.
He's not going to allow you to be completely poor, or completely rich, be satisfied with what you got.
Yeah.
And you will trust him then, rather than trust in your riches or doubt him in the fact that he's not giving you enough that you need.
Yep. If you seek him first, I don't think you're ever going to be in a position where you can't withstand the temptations of what the Lord blesses you with. Anybody else? Thanks so much for those comments. Appreciate it.
There is a lesson we can learn from these very people he's talking about. How on the guard are they for their riches? You know, people that love money, you can bet you they're watching their money. Are we watching our spiritual life? Are we guarding our spiritual life as much as they guard? Do we love our spiritual life as much as they love their money? We should.
Yeah.
We should be.
Should love it more, right? Yeah.
We should want more of our spiritual life. We should watch wherever the penny goes.
Yep.
Glad to give it away, but where am I giving it to?
Right. Yeah, and so instead of striving to be rich, we strive to be stronger and have a closer walk with God, right? Have a stronger relationship with God, be stronger in our faith. Good stuff. Anyone else? All right, number 4. If we really convinced ourselves of this principle as Christians, we could invest extra currency for what really counts. The saving and strengthening of souls to the glory of God that we love so much. So kind of reinforces some of the things we just said. Number 5, test yourself. Have you really learned your attitude towards money and things from the Bible, or have you absorbed it from contemporary culture? If the Bible is true, and it says, of course it is, then all the slick marketing and advertising that exploits and promotes the desire to be tied to money and things is just as destructive as pornography, alcohol, and drug addiction. Can money be an addiction? Absolutely. When you can't get enough of something, it's an addiction. When you give up everything else for something, that's an addiction. Good stuff. Anything else before we move on to number 3?
You come up with slick advertising way now. I said, oh, you better order this because we're fixing to quit making it.
Before it sells out again. I love that line. Order now before it sells out again. Must have sold out before. It must be good, right?
Really wouldn't want you looking at your inventory.
Yeah.
You see some of these billionaires, they want to have more so they can be the richest.
Yeah. Well, you ever?
They've got an addiction to it, and they want to be the world's richest.
Yeah.
No matter.
You can be extremely content with your home and your friend build a new house and you go over there and you see that outdoor kitchen and you go, oh, I didn't know I needed one of those. You know, it's that peer pressure too. That can be there. You might not even know about it, so you didn't know you needed it till you saw it. You didn't know it existed. Anything else? All right, let's move on. Number 3 starts talking about what we should do. So set your hope and joy in God. I'm going to read 1 Timothy 6:17. So back to 1 Timothy. Chapter 6, and we're going to read verse 17. Command those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God who gives us richly all things to enjoy. What do you mean by haughty? High-minded. I like that. That's a good. There you go.
We used to call it stuck up.
Stuck up. nose in the air, better than others. That's absolutely right.
That song we're singing, full of self.
Can we be full of ourselves sometimes? Absolutely. Yeah. Let's flip back to the New Testament, or in the New Testament to Matthew. We're going to read chapter 6, verses 19 through 21. And the title of this paragraph in my Bible says, "Lay up treasures in heaven." And I like this scripture. "Do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." And I like the word treasure there, maybe money. What could be the difference? Treasure is not necessarily money, right? Something you treasure, right? Rachel, something that's really important. Luke, let's go to Luke and read chapter 12, 33 and 34. Luke 12, 33 and 34. "Sell what you have and give alms. Provide yourself money bags which do not grow old, a treasure in the heaven that does not fail, where no thief approaches nor moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Sounds kind of similar, doesn't it? And then Luke 14, 13 through 14. "But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the maimed, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you shall be repaid at the resurrection of the just." What does that mean?
Means when you give a gift, it's that, it's a gift.
Yeah.
You don't expect something back.
Right. Anybody will give a loan, right? You know, there's places all over Texarkana where you can go in and just let them hold your title to your car, and they'll give you some money at a pretty good rate of interest. And the hope is you can't pay it back. Right? Anybody can do that, but to give, not expecting nothing in return, that's tough. That's not the way of the world. The world is scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Not the way we're supposed to be. Number 2, 1 Timothy 6:17 begins with a negative not. So let's go back to 1 Timothy. We're going to be there a lot today. So we're back to the verse we read. "And those who are rich in this present age not to be haughty, nor to trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God." So it begins with a negative not. What are those who are rich not to do? Have a sinful and false sense of pride because of their money. Thinking they're special because they have more money than someone else. Have a sinful and false sense of security because of their money. So that's a pretty good 2 things that can come with money there. A false sense of pride and a false sense of security. What's the false sense of security? Can money really bring you security? We kind of talked about some people earlier. They had a lot of things when they had money, then they lost it all. You know, everything we have comes from God, and God can take everything we have. So can the world.
Money's not gonna be there for you in return.
You sure ain't. You can't buy your way into heaven, can you?
When you go on in verse 18, it also gives a directive to those who are rich.
Talking about let them do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that they're gonna go to hell if they got it. I mean, he gives them a directive what to do with it if they do that.
And money absolutely can be used for good. It absolutely can enable you to do things that maybe you could, good things that you couldn't do if you didn't have money. So do you, all about, always, right? It always comes back to attitude. What's our intent? But intent, something really hard to prove, isn't it? But God knows. All right. Number 3, we must not allow substitutes to take the place of our hope and joy in God. Let's go to Deuteronomy. We're going to read 11 through 20. And this is kind of a long read, but we're going to go through it. Deuteronomy 8, 11 through 20. Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments, his judgments, and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, when your heart is lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, who led you through that great and terrible wilderness, in which were fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty land where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and that he might test you to do you good in the end. Then you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gained me this wealth. And you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant which he swore to your fathers, as it is this day. Then it shall be, if you by any means forget the Lord your God, and follow other gods, and serve them, and worship them, I testify against you this day that you shall surely perish, as the nation which the Lord destroys before you, so you shall perish, because you would not be obedient to the voice of the Lord your God.
They did it anyway.
They did it anyway.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So it talks here, where did those riches come from? God. But what happened? They started thinking they came from where? You know, yeah.
And idols
And idols. Yeah.
that they made with their own hands.
Go to Ezekiel 28:5. You know what's in there? I read it this morning. Give me just a second. Here we go. Ezekiel 28:5. This is the proclamation against the king of Tyre. By your great wisdom in trade, you have increased your riches, and your heart is lifted up because of your riches. So who knows what the king of Tyre said that was so bad? He said, surely I must be a god, right? And he didn't end that way, did he? That he wasn't a god. So self-worship, could that be a problem? And do people seek to get worship today? I think so. Especially powerful people. 4, we must trust in God who gives us richly all things to enjoy. That sums it up. If we're really giving credit where credit's due, there's not wrong with having those things. It's maybe not wrong to have clubs or a boat, as long as they're not becoming the most important thing in your life, right? I can enjoy the beauty of God's creation with either of those things and really appreciate what God has created and done and that peace that comes with those things. But then again, it could become a snare. There's a balance, or as Kenneth says, attitude. All important. Anything else before we move on to the next? All right. Number 4, we have to guard against pride. What does pride come before? A fall, right? Yeah, back to that attitude. Number 1, money's chief sinful attraction is the power it gives and the pride it feeds. How deceptive our hearts can be when it comes to money. See 1 John 2:15 through 18. Let's go there. 15 through 18. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. Little children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come, by which we know that is the last hour. And go to Romans 12, 1 through 2. Verse 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So, if we don't look at this world as our home, it's kind of hard to get too caught up in the things of this world, right? But it's so easy for the world to catch us up. And we get so involved in this world, in the day-to-day, the grind, and the things that go on, that we lose sight of those other things. Number 2, it says another great danger is that our affection will be carried away from God to his gifts, so that we are more in love and passionate about his gifts than we are with him. His gifts, those things that we have. Our consumer culture, and too many of us as Christians, have been baptized into the philosophy of bigger and better. The evidence that many of us have been deceived by this stuff is how little too many of us give and how much we own or are in debt over. There is a war going on between the people of God and Satan for souls. A wartime lifestyle implies that there's a great and worthy cause for which to spend and to be spent. Reference to 2 Corinthians 12:15 there. It says, Mark 8:36. Let's go there. Mark 8, verse 36. Mark 8:36 says, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? Gain the whole world and lose your soul, and it was all for nothing. Great stuff right there. Yes, sir.
Bit of research you can do. You can Google this and look up the famous last words of some very rich people. And I think that passage what Jesus said about giving the whole world and losing your own soul. When people come to the realization of their mortality, it really does change a person's outlook.
Yep. There's even a really dark song by Johnny Cash that references everything as the empire of dirt, right? It don't bring you happiness. And at the end, it ain't important. None of it matters. All right, number 5. We might wrap this up today. Let your joy in God overflow by helping others. Here's where it really starts talking about how we should use wealth and that money that we save or those things that God blesses us with. It says, read 1 Timothy 6:18 through 19. So we're back to 1 Timothy again. So 1 Timothy 6 is a pretty good place to go if you ever have questions about money and the importance of money. It covers it all. 18 and 19 are the verses we're going to read now. Let them do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share, storing up for themselves a good foundation for the time to come, that they may lay hold on eternal life. So like this verse, store up for them a good foundation for what the time to come or for others that may be in need. Is it a big blessing to be able to help others that are in need, especially maybe even family when they're in need? great feeling to be able to do.
On that note, I think that we have too many people this day and time, if they don't wanna work, they don't want handouts. Personally, those kind of people don't have time for it. Those that wanna work and do right, they're on top of my list.
I understand that. If you didn't hear Ms. Joanne, she talked about there are people that are just looking for a handout maybe, or not willing to work, want someone else to support them. And then there's those that are really willing to and want to, and who would we rather help? I think to truly appreciate anything, you have to work. You don't. With the one thing, maybe the exception being is help. Sometimes we all need help. But anyway, it's a good point. Number 2, there is to be 1, a proper sense of responsibility to others, and 2, a proper sense of proportion in reaching out to others. What does that mean? Responsibility and proportion. Well, if we have a responsibility to others, that's an obligation, right? Something that we need to do. What does it mean by proper sense of proportion?
Could that possibly mean teaching them how to fish instead of just giving them fish?
Possibly. How to fish instead of a hand up instead of a hand out, maybe?
That's the way I see it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, could be. I think of proportion, I think of an allotment. Maybe how much of our time should be focused on others and not just maybe on ourselves. So we have a responsibility, but it can't be the only thing, right? There's got to be time for family, time for selves, but there's got to be that time for helping others and reaching out to others. My opinion. Anybody have another thought or opinion on that?
I think Galatians 6:10, where it tells us where we have opportunity, God's teaching us there to be aware, to always be ready, and to be aware of opportunities that come along. Therefore, we won't get disproportion in that. And so if we're always ready, it's possible that that would happen.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to see opportunity when you're looking for it, isn't it? Yes, sir. James.
What I see, or think of when I read this is, for instance, we've supported Rod Kyle for a long time. And if we just gutted the account to Rod Kyle every month, when Eugene came along wanting to help those Ukrainians, we wouldn't have been able to help him. So it's all about balance. Of course, we get letters in the mail, not weekly, but almost weekly, from people you ain't never heard of, and nobody else has ever heard of wanting money too, so you kind of weed through those, and just pray that you're doing the right thing, and I think that is exactly the same where you're in the Walmart parking lot, somebody's begging for money, or you get the letter at the church.
Right.
People want money, you just gotta use the best judgment, pray about it.
I think it's a great example. If you give to an organization, you're going to start getting inquiries from other organizations. They share that information. And not a bad thing, I don't guess, but you could get overwhelmed in a hurry.
I think it's kind of like Michael was talking about too. If you help people that's desirous of getting ahead, doing it themselves, because it said, if a man won't work, don't feed him, he don't need to eat. If somebody's not willing to do something, if they're not willing for a hand up instead of a hand out, then, we need to look to make sure we're not giving to somebody, like maybe our federal government gives people and they don't wanna work now. We can do the same thing for people that they need.
Sure.
Expect us to take care of their needs all the time instead of get down to it, so we need to look at that proportion too.
I agree. But I would err on the side of caution that I don't always know all the background Now, it used to be real easy to think that America's the land of opportunity and everybody had the same opportunities I have. But what about somebody that grew up in the projects in Chicago and they had gangs completely threatening their family and life, and that was their only sense to say, they did not have the same opportunities I had. You know, so I tend to want to err on the side of caution and saying I'm more likely to be judged for not helping someone truly in need than for maybe helping somebody that fooled me. And I didn't need it, and I gave it to them.
Responsibility.
Yeah.
Two-way street, because Lisa and I, we first got started. There was some things that we needed help with. And some folks helped us financially. Mister, you don't think I thought that dollar was a lot more special than a dollar that I made?
Yeah.
That dollar they give me went exactly where it was supposed to be. I didn't spend $10 of it and have $20 left to go play. When somebody helps me, it's a blessing from God. It's also a blessing from that person.
And also obligation, right?
And,
Yeah. Yeah.
God gives us the gospel, and we should be just as honored to have it and not waste it.
It's true. Yep. What we had was free to us, but wasn't free, right?
It wasn't free to them.
Right.
Are we supposed to help our brothers and sisters before we do the outsiders?
I think it says especially those in the church, right? Yeah.
That goes back to what James said about giving everything you've got to one person that's out there as a missionary. If you give to all these handout people at church, then you don't have money left over for your members.
Yeah. And I can only imagine the extra burden and responsibility of that you're doling out the money that's been given to God for his work and just maybe money I earned. Pray for those people that make those decisions, and God give them wisdom. Let's move on. We're almost to the end. Those who are passionate about the Lord must see their money as currency for ministry. So I think we talked about that. Currency for ministry. Good can be done with money. Admittedly, there is room for much personal prayer and reflection in this area. For example, is it wrong to have 2 to 5 automobiles, 2 to 3 homes, bank accounts with X amount of dollars? And the answer is maybe and maybe not. Comes back to attitude, right? What are you using those things for? Ephesians 4:28. Let's go there real quickly. Ephesians 4:28. Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need. So kind of back to what we talked about. It's good to work and get those things. So it speaks of 3 levels of how to live with things. You can steal to get, you can work to get, and you can work to get to give. I think that's pretty well put. And then number 6, too many Christians seem to live primarily on level 2, that's work to get. But read and think about 2 Corinthians 9:8. We'll go there real quick. 2 Corinthians 9:8. And God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. Absolutely, money can be used for the right thing. Why does God bless us with such abundance? So that we can have enough to live on and then use the rest for all manner of good works to show our love and passion for him and to share it with others to help alleviate their spiritual and physical misery. Thank you so much. Appreciate your attention and your input. James, pick back up next Sunday, Lord willing.